my own religious background was pretty much a case of benign neglect. It was my parents' practice to attend the church that was nearest where we lived. So they churched us until we were of an age to make up our mind about it, and then we, both my brother and I, promptly discarded the entire enterprise, and my parents, of course, having done their duty, were enormously relieved. They quit going to church, and our Sundays were free, which was nice. Except I must say that my father had a genuine religious fervor. My father was a worshipful master. He was a worshipful master, which meant that he chaired a lodge one year. But he impressed me greatly because that was his religion. The man could scarcely read. He was partially illiterate, and yet he mastered the entire liturgical hocus pocus of the Masonic Lodge, reading to himself, mumbling night after night in front of his desk, memorizing the Masonic ritual. In fact, became a coach and coached several people in the rites of the mystic order. His idea was that the Masonic Lodge was devoted to God as the it's an Enlightenment idea. God is the architect, the planner of all things. And my father was a self-taught carpenter, so of course that was just catnip for him. It was inevitable that he'd be drawn to it, and that and the fact that it was all based on formal ethical relations between people, which he was most comfortable with. He was an idealist, and filled with a sense of self-inadequacy, which of course as a child I never suspected. And so the idea that God was some kind of glorified carpenter was extremely appealing to him. I, of course, worshiping him, I mean, to me the man was a statue. He represented all that was ideal and exalted, and so I absorbed all of that passion out of my passion for him, but since our relations were so entirely thwarted and distanced, I absorbed his enterprise, but pursued it by means that he couldn't possibly comprehend and that were entirely my own, because I rebelled against him, and ended up designing a giant godlike man that was made by carpenters, and a kind of carpentered God. And so there's certainly a profound connection for me personally in that. And the other thing that the man worshipped was nature. His cathedral was the hills and the mountains and the streams, and you could go out and fish. And we have a call. That's Karen. Karen's coming. There we are.
Camera should always be rolling.
The brain cactus.
Oh, excellent.
Look at that. Look at the conuberations. Okay. That's great. I think you have to get by this effigy.
You're doing an interview without your hand?
I'm doing an interview with my hat on purpose. I'm eschewing my hat.
Maybe people will recognize you more readily.
Goddamn I'm doing an interview without my hat. The hat is got in my way. I actually assumed that hat on purpose. It's sort of a trademark look, and appear wearing it everywhere. But
Are those days over?
it was my father's hat originally, and I've replaced it 3 times with a Stetson facsimile. But no, I'm dissatisfied with it. Though I think I'll always go in public with my hat because I feel naked without it. But here we're in my room, so I don't have to wear my hat. I actually don't have my pants on.
Get you in proper frame here. Okay, now that's more believable.
Yeah. Move the camera up. I have no pants on. This is a power interview, and I've taken off my pants.
Larry Harvey bears all.
That's right.
For the camera.
I was talking about my father's mysticism. Man was a mystic, and had this mystical affinity for this emotion that excited him as he moved through nature, and so taking the two influences, he was a carpenter, a mason, regarded imagine God as the architect planner. I imagine him as God at second hand, and so it seemed natural that something godlike, an image made godlike, would take the form of a constructed body, created out of the idiom of residential vernacular architecture. Burning Man is that. He's basically a kind of a balloon frame house type object, and then the idea that there was something godlike about nature, great forces beyond one's control, that appall and exalt one at once. And indeed, if you look at Burning Man, he's designed so that the wind will sieve right through him, so that he won't blow over, because of course we're in an environment there that's absolutely ruled by nature at its uttermost. And so for me, the connection with the religious sentiments, such as I could gain them of my childhood, is very immediate, very direct.
Is this a religion that's recreated every year with each burn?
I don't know. It's not really a religion. If it were a religion, there would be a priestly caste that was solidly interposed between the believers and the adduced object of their belief, and the priests would tell them what the tests were for belonging to the faith. The priests would work overtime to inspire faith. I work overtime to inspire people's faith being this overwhelmingly immediate experience that connects what people feel is innermost within them with what they feel is outermost cosmically without. I work overtime to create that impression. It's an illusion, of course, but a vital and necessary one. But priests would go one step further, and the people who run Burning Man aren't priests. The priests would of course, introduce the element of dogma, and of course that would be based on certain supernatural concepts, and I think that's hard for people today to believe in. you were talking earlier about learning about paleontology when you were a kid and wondering how that might possibly fit in with some concept of the magical creation of the world by supernatural entities. Of course, it doesn't work at all. And I think that increasingly among us, living as we do, surrounded by all this technology, which is in fact the immediate fruit of science and the proof of its power and correctness, it's very difficult to believe in that, except for the New Age people, of course, who will readily believe anything. But in the context of the modern world, that that superstitious attitude seems foolish, and so what we've done, or what I've tried to do at least, is I'm very susceptible to the religious experience. I always have been, and so I've tried to create a context in which that experience can happen. But having no adherence to supernatural beliefs, being really, I've not wanted to create a religion. Burning Man it leads people up to the threshold of what religious experience is. In fact, it gives them the experience pretty largely. I mean, that really does have to do with a relationship to well, in a way, what religion does is it creates this experience of exquisitely intensified meaningfulness. When something, people keep saying, well, what does Burning Man mean? And what I want to say to them is meaning isn't something you can quantify and then dole out to people in doses. Meaning really is a dynamic relationship. You experience things as meaningful in your life when you sense a relationship between what is innermost within you, which is unsayable, and what is outermost beyond you, which is ineffable. It's that connection, that arc between the two things, and that's what religion majors in. That's religion's long suit. Religion connects the most intimate with awesome forces that are above and beyond and beneath you, in which you have no control over. And if you can create an experience like that for people, then you have created this very fertile ground of meaning. Now, what sprouts up out of that ground has a lot to do with their particular experience, but it does have the property of absolutely commanding their attention and profoundly altering their life experience. Religion's good for that. So in that sense, we're purveying a religious experience. What happens historically within religions is that, of course, if you create a relationship between what's most intimately and unsayably within people, and that which is most ineffably and awesomely without them, you've created it's very exciting. It's the kind of thing that has commanded history more than once before now. It's the very kernel of what meaning is. it leaves out the entire world, the entire moral world, and the world of politics, and all of that. It just leaps over them. What religions do, of course, is they're more than happy to fill up that gap with all kinds of with politically coercive dogmas that can then be used to exploit and control people, on in the mundane world that we live in. And we don't do that. We just leave that. We leave that ground empty, as empty as the Black Rock Desert, absolutely empty. The Black Rock Desert is like that. It has that same exquisite perception, that same connection between what is most intimately within you and what is most awesomely without. It's odd just standing in that space, how with an almost exquisite vibration back and forth, you can begin to feel that you're enclosed in this womb capsule. There's nothing there but land, sky. There's no perspective. There's no there's no scale, and it's almost as if you're a fetus within it. It's this tight little envelope. It's tight as your skin. At the same time, you alternate between that feeling that it's a very small space with no scope or scale, and at the same time, you come awake to the fact that you're a small speck within the center of this boundless space that expands out as expansively as it comes near to outer space. It reaches out indefinitely. You feel like you're just this tiny thing on a rock in the universe, and being out there, the excitement that people feel being out there in that space is this exquisite vibration between the sense of being in this very intimate space and being in this absolutely cosmic space, and nothing in between to qualify that perception. Nothing. Now that's the religious experience. That's essentially what the religious experience is, the connection between what's innermost and what's outermost, vibrating back and forth so that they're one thing. That's what the mystics go out to the desert to come back to announce. That's the great discovery that they've always made. We're bringing out thousands of people, and at one time or another in their tenure of the desert there, everybody in some way stumbles into that perception. They come back feeling that they shared a mystic experience with 10,000 people. That's why we've grown so fast. It's more than just people having a good time. It's the sense that they have been bonded to others as they have enjoyed a mystical perception, and that's why as we go along, the forms, our presentation of the man becomes more and more explicitly religious in that way. You could call it a kind of religion, but one that doesn't have any precedent, at least in that respect, that it doesn't involve political control.
Okay.
I like that other idea. That meaning is this connection between what's in and out. That's what religion does. It goes to the ultimate outer and the ultimate inner. That's what it does.
I like your description of feeling like an embryo between the sky and the desert.
Oh yeah, people feel that way.
I have that.
Sure, everybody feels that way. It's hard for them to talk about it because it's so audacious. I mean, it's so. It's hard. But with an infinite horizon, with nothing but an horizon in it, anything that stands above you is perforce exalted, is extremely impressive. So if you put the man on top of a temple that's 2 foot taller than the average person, it impresses them. If you put the man in town against some tenement building, if we erected him up against the AT&T office building or whatever in town, he'd look measly and negligible. But if you put it out there and make it the tallest thing in the environment, then of course it's perceived in much the same way that people perceive any temple. That is, temples are always designed to seem like they're an axis that it exceeds any normal experience and leads up to heaven. It's an optical illusion, but a necessary one. We start out life enormously impressed by the things that are above us, because of course we're pretty short, and being vertebrates, being upright is a big deal for us. And
Actually,
they're impressed by, they've got this vertebrate psychology, and anyone who can get their spine up there, is a big deal. It's why dogs and cats will, are willing to regard us as masters.
There was, did see a burning dog there last year, I think, wasn't there?
Well, I don't think caterpillars would be overly impressed by us, or jellyfish. I don't think jellyfish would be put any store in us. They're not being vertebrates. It's not all pegged to being nervously organized on this something like that. You know what Thomas Huxley called God? The gaseous vertebrate. And at the dinner table, apparently, at the time that other Victorian families might say grace, there would be some allusion made to the gaseous vertebrate. And since God, Jehovah seemed to have these properties very much of a vertebrate, but his substance was diffuse and nebulous and ambiguous, and so it was hard to really, it was sort of a cross, and kind of God-haunted, frankly, and I am of the opinion that what people really need is something like God. What they really need is something like God, and in this postmodern age, but something that is not tied to a coercive political formula. But I do think that what we really need is something strong at the center. What we found, we've invented this man, and we have found that people flocked to him. That we found that they began to that's probably Burning Man. Burning Man has been making calls to me. He calls but he doesn't say anything. He just breathes. And I'm beginning to get annoyed. He's stalking me. He was looking through my window the other night, and I felt violated. Hello. Oh, hi, Mike. Mike, I'm in the middle of actually I have a camera trained on me. Yeah. Would you like to say something to the microphone? Hold on here. 30 seconds. God, I hate technology. Here we go. This is Mike Boner. He's an artist who works with us. Let's see if I can. Are you still on the line? Oh, I've cut him off. Well, this interview is turning. Hello, Mike? Oh, there you are. Okay. Well, we have a technological problem. Are you there? Okay, speak to the microphone. I can't quite get it. There we go. Hello? All right. Where's your mic? Say something to the people. Is he saying anything? Oh, no, you got, yeah, there you go. Well, we see, we're trying here, folks. Hello? Oh, it's not working. I've got an intermittent connection in my telephone. I was attempting to mic you. You don't? Well, you know. That's, yeah, I know. That's my policy, too. Yeah, this is tough. Oh, did you know we're having a reception for artists? Save me from myself, Karen. Yes, at Will Rogers' place on the at the 2nd of June on Sunday, we're organizing people for the show at Somar. Now, I can't give you a $40 budget for tampons this time, though. You got to understand that one. Well, we're gonna meet at Will Rogers' place. Do you know where that is? It's 2112 West Street in East Oakland. Starts at 4 o'clock. It's a potluck. No, 2112 West Street. Yeah. Well, I'm not either, but it's the thing you do is get a map. You're in Oakland. Otherwise, I'd tell you how to get there from San Francisco. Well, not handy, but get a map. It's right off of Grand, I think. Is it Grand Avenue? Yeah, it's right off of Grand. It's Sunday. 4 in the afternoon, and tell your roommate. Okay, come on over and tell Dave. Okay. Well, then call me back at sometime soon. I'm not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, call me. I'll probably refer you to Harley, but call me. Okay. Okay. Jeez. I don't know. You know, I'm just trying to create trouble for myself. You know, Mike Boner's great. He's full of enthusiasm.
What's he work on? What's his?
Well, he's sweet, generous. He does a unique act. He writes songs and performs them wearing I don't know, rubber teddies and in pumps he's right out there, and the songs have a kind of crazy merit. I fear that he lacks discipline, but he's a visionary and wholly motivated by passion for what he does, and so I've got a soft spot in my heart for him. I mean, he's caused, you know, he's done nothing but offend everyone, but you know, that's just fine. I'll delegate it. I'll pass that to somebody else, and they can deal with it. I'll let Harley deal with it. But
so is Harley pretty integral to?
Yes, Harley is the where, what, when person. I'm the why person, but Harley is where, what, and when, and that's if you major in why, then you'd better find where, what, and when while you're at it. Otherwise, you'll end up at sea. So she's very organized, and she's manages our camp in the desert, and she manages has a lot to do with linking together our shows in San Francisco, and I like that. It's very grounding, and the thing to do if you're embarked on purposes of great enterprise is to figure out what you're not any good at, and then find other people who can do that well. And this we've managed to do.
So how does John Law fit into the whole picture?
Well, that's a good question. John Law started working on Burning Man about 6 years ago, and the first time I met John Law, he was beseeching me to burn the man on Baker Beach, in contravention of both the law and the verbal agreement that I made to the representatives of the law, who came down and said, you can erect this thing. We had 1,000 people, and we tried to sneak a giant 40-foot giant down a cliff, which was hard to do. It had grown as large as it ever got in San Francisco, and they'd come down and they'd seen it, and we'd actually convinced them to let us erect it with the provision that we wouldn't burn it, and then they ran away, and to protect themselves, and so that it really was entirely up to us whether we'd burn it or not. But if we had, it would have burned our bridge with the authorities in town, tenuous as it was. But we actually had a moral relation to them. We had an agreement at that point. I was loath to violate it because I'd given my word, and besides that, I had a video project, and and darkness had fell, and it was impossible to properly treat the figure so as to burn it in a satisfactory way, and I just didn't want to do it. And John was at that point helping us with, what was John helping with security, I think, and involved, I don't know really, perhaps in raising it, or well, probably not in some technical capacity. And he said we've got to do it, and I fought him off, and Jerry James, my principal partner at that point, it was in '96, wanted to was going back and forth and thought we probably should burn it. There was a great we were surrounded by a crowd of 1,000 people who were filled with fire lust, and wanted to destroy it. In fact, they started yelling, "Burn the fucker!" At which point I determined I wouldn't burn it under any circumstances, and dug my heels into the sand, which isn't a very good thing to anchor yourself in. But and we didn't burn it. We actually lowered it. People tried to burn it. People ran up out of the audience. It became a mob. Suddenly, we were dealing with a mob. This is our 5th year doing it. We were dealing with a mob. We were dealing with, in all the ugliness that implies. They just wanted to see, it was burn the fucker, burn the fucker. Until that point, we had been a small group, and we had invested all this labor into the thing. And so we had an innate respect for the thing we were destroying, but these were people who had no respect for it at all. No respect for it, no respect for us. And I was appalled and not about to give in to their will, and so we managed to. I actually grabbed a guy who was trying for the third time to light it with a big lighter, and he grabbed me by the throat, and I had to peel him off me. It was, I mean, had he been able to kill me, he probably would have. But we managed to get the figure down, and the burn didn't take place, and that is why later that year we went to the desert. So it was a signal step in the evolution of the project. Going to the desert, of course, created an entirely new event, and so it was an act in a confrontation fraught with drama. And that's how I met John. In fact, I said to Jerry, "Who is this moron with the handlebar mustaches?" And then I subsequently got to know John, and John became John is a stalwart and is a man of action and full of passion and ready to do and fervent for in lunatic enterprises, visionary efforts, as few people are, and someone whom I came to depend on greatly, and he became my partner, along with Michael, and they represented what's called the Cacophony Society. John was instrumental in founding it, and Michael soon became the chief organizer and backbone of the enterprise. And so we had this ready-made group in San Francisco that was ready to haul this giant wooden statue out into the blankest space on Earth, 350 miles away, and burn it in the middle of this vast desert. And where are you going to find? Where otherwise are you going to find people who are willing to do something like that? And so we felt we were well met, and became partners as a result.
Excellent. And I guess maybe talk a little bit about Michael's role. I guess, and John's currently, as far as what they both do.
Michael's in charge of. Michael is now the controller, and John is now in charge of operations. Michael's very good at organizing informational systems, and he's a man of absolute probity. So we trust him with money, and it's good to have someone like that in any operation. And John is in charge of our the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure that we depend on in the desert. That includes our major structure at the center of camp. That includes our power grid. That includes scouting the site. He's also a brilliant politician. So we've depended on John many times in the past, and to interface with the authorities, since we are doing something which, on the face of it, is more than unconventional. Potentially, we're doing this. We're engaged in this aggressively eccentric activity, which could easily alarm people whose job it is to enforce order. And John is very good at presenting a human face to the authorities. He loves to do it, and convincing them that it's really all right. I think that has something to do with the fact that his father was military, but a military maverick, and so John can square those two ideas in convincing cops that everything that appearances to the contrary, everything's under control, and we're your friends. And so John has a lot to do with that. John Michael and I carried the project on our shoulders from '86 through the next 3 years, and then over that time, we've gained many other friends who have begun to assume all the responsibilities and the duties involved in creating a more thoroughgoing and civilized activity. That is to say, coordinating the efforts of dozens and dozens of people and thinking responsibly about our duty towards the thousands of people who participate. So John and I and Michael they have formed at last the executive committee that exists within a organizational committee that exists within a much larger group of people who are doing hundreds of volunteer chores and whom we all depend upon to make Burning Man happen. Burning Man is essentially a volunteer effort. We couldn't possibly pay for it by any ordinary means. If we were paying for this by ordinary means, we would have to make it an intensively commercial enterprise, and we're not an intensively commercial organization. Our income is limited to the direct contributions of people who participate, and we're really not doing very much to commodify the experience, which is what you normally do if you had to pay a lot of people to do things. And so that's one way we've kept the sense of immediacy within our organization, is that people largely do this out of passion. Ask me something.
Okay, yeah, still talking about the people involved, and sort of with Michael and his alter ego of Danger Ranger and Vanessa and the other Rangers. I guess maybe if you can talk a little about them.
Michael? Are we running here?
Yeah, we're on.
Michael. Well, he's an extraordinary man. We fabulized him. How do you well, Michael is the spine and brain of the Cacophony Society. His efforts have held that together beyond what would have normally been its life term. It's a society of anarchists, and of course, the half-life of any anarchist organization is considerably less than 2 years. But it's Michael's discipline and his will and determination that have kept it alive, because it exists principally by virtue of putting out a newsletter once a month, which coordinates the far-flung anarchistic tendencies of those who stage the events that create the continuity that makes everyone believe that there is actually a Cacophony Society, Michael is functions in Burning Man as well. We've kicked him upstairs. I've kicked him upstairs. I've kicked myself upstairs. Kicking oneself upstairs is not a very pleasant activity. But perforce that's been necessary. Which is to say that the people whose energy, whose passionate impetus help propel this thing into being, now have to take a more responsible position, because of course we've drawn thousands in our train, So we passed from what is a sort of corsair mode, a frontier situation, into what must necessarily become a kind of civilization out there. And Michael started the Black Rock Rangers, and then became becoming in the process Danger Ranger, who was responsible for the welfare and safety of everyone. And that suits Michael because he's essentially a caretaker. And like John Law, has a very moral nature and thinks continually about others and their welfare. If the three of us hadn't really had that a bone in our bodies, this thing would have degenerated quickly into a truly anarchist society, and perished because nobody cared enough about other people. And so Michael founded the Black Rock Rangers, whose duty it is to look after the welfare of people in the desert, which is an environment where it's very possible to become lost or injured in this wilderness space. But sometimes it's hard to say what. Michael's a very interesting person. He's a man on a mission always, and he goes here and he goes there and he performs his discrete feats, which and then at some point in the proceedings sort of drifts into the outer purlieus of the campfire. You see his face glimmering there for a moment, and then he's gone. And the rumor is that Michael is able to, as Danger Ranger, is able to bilocate and appear in two places at the same time. We have some anecdotal evidence that this has actually occurred. So he actually follows laws and rules known only to himself. And but you can always be sure that that he's motivated by some urgent and responsible motive. We depend on Michael. Michael's funny. Michael, to me, Michael has always seemed like a bust of antique virtue. You know, he's got a face. He looks a little like Voltaire, somehow to me. A famous bust of Voltaire. And like Voltaire, he is a repository of maverick virtue, and I trust him with more thoroughly than I trust most people, and he's one of the most beautifully ethical people that I know, and I deal with him constantly. So that's Michael. A wonderful character, as John Law is. John Law, Michael, and I have all become characters, perforce. It's part of our public persona. People have this need to mythologize their leaders. And it's something that I suppose anybody who leads an organization must lend themselves to. Although it's not an entirely a pleasant process, and really can be rather alienating if you haven't the sense to make a distinction between yourself and your public function.
What are your hopes for the future of the project?
Well, my hopes are grandiose. Um, what we're doing right now, of course, has got sexy in the media. Has got, you know, we're riding this great upward curve, and we're getting all this flattering public attention. And our actual operation is expanding exponentially, and that's pretty heady stuff. But I think that beyond that, immediate worldly success, that Burning Man has in it, at least potentially, the germ of a much more profound enterprise. I think we're offering people something that, I don't know, simply as a marketing proposition, we're offering people something they can't get anywhere else. That's why they're flocking to us. And I think what we're offering is a chance to associate with other people in a much more powerful, potent, and profoundly meaningful way than they can in any other aspect of their lives. That's why we hear all these tales of what amount to conversion experiences, you know, like Paul struck down on the way to Damascus. Was he going to Damascus? I think our at this point in our history in the West, and indeed in terms of the entire world, we're at a point of crisis, and the old process whereby cultures were created, which held human society together, that process is ceasing to become a viable thing. And the alternative is bleak, very bleak. And I think that Burning Man represents a way that people can create at least the model of a way to live, a new way to live, that has the potent power of ways of life which existed in the past, and which evolved over very long periods of time, and which in their organization took into account the most profound aspects of human nature. I think we found a formula for recreating that, at least as a model, for a brief period of time in the desert. And I in the process, I think we're kind of reinventing what the most basic elements. Hey, it's the phone. One of the sports. Hello. Who's this? Oh, Kevin, how you doing? No, that's the Climate Theater party. Starts at 9, and it's their closeout party. Joe's giving up the ghost. They're not going to be doing Climate Theater. Really won't exist anymore. No, a non-salon will be the Friday following. Is that what? Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah. It's right across the street from Anon. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm on the list. I doubt it. I mean, I haven't even talked to Joe for 3 days. He's had strep throat. I don't even know if Joe's going to be there, frankly. I assume, I mean, he's got to. They'll wheel him in on a stretcher if they have to. But I don't even want to try to get in touch with him. I didn't. They charge him money for this thing? I guess they... Well, I can try. I haven't even, frankly, I haven't even thought about it. Oh, fine. I'll try it. I'll tell you what. I'll call the climate and see if there's any hope there. And if there is, you're at the top of the list. Oh, down there? Great, cool. I'm in the middle of an interview. We're actually on videotape right now. Okay, see ya. Kevin's great.
Is that Kevin Pritchard?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been trying to get a hold of his number. Actually, it's on my...
Yeah, he's a kind of a dodgy guy.
I first saw him working on the stage, I guess, last year, right? Is that...
Yeah. He lives over there on Columbus. Right next to some strip joint. I knew someone had to live there. You're always wondering who lives in North Beach. Who the fuck are these people who live in North Beach? You know. Let's see.
I guess since Stuart sort of helped collaborate this idea with me, what role does Stuart Mangrum play?
Stuart actually is someone who came, who I met through our as a result of our promotional activities. He was just some stranger who called in one day and said, "I'd like to do something," and so I did not meet him as the result of any personal acquaintance. He was actually attracted by our publicity, and I quickly gained the idea that he was a very able person, and he's turned out to be more than a soldier, a veritable captain of men and women, and now is I'm not sure what his title is. Is he a czar, or he's a maven? He's now in charge of our publicity, and he and I work on our newsletter, our biannual newsletter, and he also supervises our internet activity. So Stuart is essentially our executive in charge of all phases of how the project interfaces with the public at large.
And actually, along those same terms, this year there seems to be sort of a twist with Hell and Dante's Inferno. How did that all sort of materialize?
Oh, well, we started... Well, I just noticed that people were doing Hell out there anyway, you know, and given the way that we live today in America, it makes sense that people would want to exercise their demons in that fashion. I think that given the American way of life in the last phase of this 20th century, that there's a lot of rage and pain among us, and because people are so starved for any meaningful context for their actions, and there's this huge narcissistic trauma that our society has suffered, maugre all our wealth and the abundance of goods that we enjoy. And so the artists kept coming out and doing these sort of hellish, tormented things, and authoring visions of hell in one form or another. So I thought, well, why not just embrace that, and perhaps in doing so we could channel it into a more constructive form and turn it into catharsis. so that there was so that we might secure some hope at the other end of that passage through hell, and make it meaningful, and rather than mindlessly destructive, which is all too common a reaction. And so we decided that we would enact the Inferno cast in a modern context. So that's our theme. You know, frankly, it doesn't really. You mainly just need a theme. It helps if you have an overarching theme. What that does is it focuses the efforts of all the people who. This is a cacophony idea too. It helps focus the disparate inspirations of all of the folks who end up collaborating, and it's a good formula for a party too. If you think about the memorable parties you've attended in your life, they all have some kind of theme that allows everyone to range themselves in contemplation of some one thing, and so we followed that strategy, you know, for years, and informally or now rather consciously, we invent a theme for every year, and our theme this year is the Inferno, is conceived as an afterworld, an underworld, indeed a place of torment, the home of all that which one casts out of oneself, and which in hell or in the Inferno rises up to confront one. This could be all of what one hates about the world around one, or it might be what one hates within oneself, a more challenging proposition. And so we're now that we do shows in town, we will use that as the theme of our show at Somar in San Francisco in July of this year, and then we will take that out and we will elaborate it on Saturday night in the desert, on the night before the man is burned. I'm trying to my most hopeful idea is that by confronting anger and pain before we burn the man, we can exercise those emotions so that people's hearts are freer to open up on Sunday night when the man is burned in a more affirmative way, right? Because mysticism is always about a kind of eternal yes, you know, an opening of the heart against all odds, against the fear of death itself, to what's beyond one's small self.
You know, there's a rumor that corporate interests have taken over some aspects of health.
Corporate interests have taken over aspects of Burning Man. In fact, we have been approached by Helco, and I'm about to sign a contract with Helco. I'm going to receive a very lucrative golden parachute, and in fact, our entire organization will be wholly owned as a subsidiary of Helco. We've used Helco as you know, people are so benumbed by their experience anymore that they've lost even the capacity for irony and satire. Our satire wrapped around the theme of hell this year is that Burning Man has been bought out by a multinational called Helco, and indeed that's a topical thing. Everyone really is feeling more and more in America that that our lives have somehow been perverted, co-opted, distorted by this vast economic engine, the result of free enterprise run amok, and that regularly all that people hold dear, or that moves them or excites them, is appropriated by this great economic process that no one seems to be responsible for, and turned into in spiritual things are hideously deformed and turned into mere objects of consumption, and that we're losing our soul in the process. And so we thought that we would concentrate on that idea, and create this fiction for those of you out there who don't understand satire, and that we have been that we have sold our souls to the devil, and we will do a show at Somar in which everyone will have the opportunity to sell their souls as part of a very rationalized economic enterprise, and we're going to virtually run an assembly line whereby you can gain, whereby you can sell your soul to Satan, and gain worldly happiness. And in our scheme, Satan is no longer the prince of darkness. He's actually sold his direct interest in hell, and he now exists as a company spokesman. He's rather an employee of Hellco, and Satan is now to hell pretty much what Colonel Sanders is to chicken. And it's funny, I've told people about this idea that about Satan, and then I go on to tell them how Satan in fact lives in Sausalito, and has a wonderful place with multiple decks and hot tubs, and even hipsters, even people who are conversant with this joke that we've created, suddenly begin to believe me. When I start talking about how he's a wonderful fellow when you meet him, and he has decks and there are hot tubs, as soon as I mention the decks and the hot tubs, they believe. They actually start saying, "Well, really? Is he? It's really very curious to me." They're quite, despite every evidence, to the contrary. As soon as I touch upon the material reward that the devil, a fictitious character, has received from this large corporation, everyone suddenly slips into this uncannily believing mode, and I can see it, the cast in their eyes. I can see they actually half or more than half believe that I actually know Satan, and I've been to his place, and I've steeped myself in his hot tub, and if they could get a little closer to me, I'd invite them along. This amazes me. It's probably evidence that we've hit on a theme that's worth pursuing. And you too could come in, and the three decks, and hot tubs. 4 different temperatures, satellite tubs beyond that. You'll love it.